Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I have some fun drugstore products to share with you. It's the new Makeup Revolution Reloaded palettes. I have all four of them and they actually just launched at Ulta Beauty for $7 a piece. So each palette has 15 shades and at least 3 of them are pretty much total dupes for higher end palettes. So I can't wait to share this with you guys. I have swatches and also my thoughts as I've been trying them over the past 2 weeks. So let's get started. So before we get into the swatches and comparisons, I want to just talk briefly about the packaging and then the formula. So these come in plastic packaging. It's not the best, but for $7 I think it's pretty good. It's pretty sturdy. They click really tightly, so you don't have to worry about these popping open if you're going to travel with them. Also, inside are 15 shades and they're really close together. There's not a lot of space between them, so they really fit a good amount of product in here. Each one has a mix of matte and shimmer shades, and I would say that the formula runs pretty consistently throughout all four palettes, so I don't really need to go into each separate palette in depth as far as formula goes because I found them all to be pretty comparable. I've tried them all at this point, and while they're definitely not as heavily pigmented as a high-end palette would be, I think that they are really, really good for $7. The matte shades are very smooth and easy to blend. They pick up well with a brush. I was actually very impressed with them. I found that they apply better to my eyes than they actually did doing finger swatches, which is sometimes the case with palettes. You just never know when you're swatching how they're actually going to apply to the eyes. They're not super pigmented, but they definitely are more pigmented than I thought that they would be at this price point. And to be honest, I don't always love super pigmented, especially matte shadows, only because they are difficult when you pick up a little bit on your brush and then you try to go into your crease. It's like you put too much and then you spend all this time trying to get rid of it and blend it out. I much prefer something that's just a little bit less pigmented, but that I can sort of build up and blend to the intensity that I want. So if you're like me and you like to be able to build your matte shadows a little bit more, these would be perfect for you as well as for beginners. Moving on to the shimmer shades. There's sort of two different shimmer textures going on in these palettes. Some of them are those rich, buttery shimmer shades that pick up really easily with a brush and pack a lot of pigment onto your eyes. And then there are some shimmer shades that have a little bit more of like that flakier, chunky texture that doesn't pick up well with a brush. I tend to like to apply those with my finger. I just use my ring finger and pat a little bit on my eyes and they work beautifully that way. Or another way that I tested those out would be to just pack it onto your brush, then spritz a little bit of setting spray and then apply it wet, and they work beautifully that way as well. Okay, so then let's get into each palette individually, and I'm going to show you some swatches and also some comparison swatches to the higher end dupes. First up is the Newtrals 2. This is the only one that I can't really find an exact dupe for. I've heard people say that it reminds them of the Huda Beauty Desert Dusk palette, and I'll show you a photo right now of the two side by side. I don't really think that they are exact dupes. I see a few similar shades, not enough to call it an all-over dupe, at least in my opinion. I've also heard people compare this to the Too Faced Just Peachy Mattes. I also don't think it's a dupe for that. Again, there's maybe a handful of shades that sort of match up, but not really. So out of the four Reloaded palettes, this one is probably the most unique that doesn't have an exact dupe anywhere for it. It has like your really, really warm toned reds and pinks and purple. You have some neutral pops in here, browns, a champagne pink color. You have your off-white matte. So it's just a really beautiful and fun palette. So out of the four Reloaded palettes, I would say this is probably the most unique one, and it doesn't really have a dupe. So if you have the higher end palettes to the other three that I'm going to show you, you could probably skip those, but this one might be worth picking up because it is different. Next up is the Iconic Division palette, and you can probably tell right away by looking at it that this is a dupe for the Anastasia Subculture palette. Now, the Subculture palette has a lot of controversy surrounding the formula. A lot of people did not like it. It is very intensely pigmented, but it's also super powdery. So you'll see in my swatches side by side, which I'm going to insert a photo right now, the Anastasia palette is definitely way more pigmented than the Iconic Division. However, as I said earlier, if you like more buildable shadows and you don't like that crazy intensity, then you might want to grab this one because they are almost a shade for shade dupe. Next up is the Iconic Fever palette, and this one is a dupe for the Naked Heat. I actually don't have the Naked Heat palette. I gave mine away, but I have seen comparison swatches between this and Naked Heat online. It's again almost a shade for shade dupe. This one has 3 additional shades as well. So if you don't have the Naked Heat palette and you love these really rich, warm sort of fall colors, this would be a great option to pick up. And then the last palette, Iconic Vitality, is almost an exact shade for shade dupe for the Anastasia Modern Renaissance palette. This one has 1 additional shade, which is this black shade down here. It's a matte black. Every other shade is pretty much the same. Again, the quality doesn't quite compare. The Modern Renaissance palette is more pigmented than this one is. However, once again, if you don't mind building up the colors a little bit and the Modern Renaissance palette isn't in your budget, then this is a great affordable option. So when it comes to the new Makeup Revolution Reloaded palettes, I say get it, especially if you don't have the 3 dupes that I showed you today, the higher end versions, or they're just not in your budget. These are amazing for $7. I think they definitely perform just as well as palettes that cost 2 or even 3 times as much. But if you already have the higher end ones and you're happy with those, you could probably skip these 3. The only one I would say maybe you could consider getting is the Newtrals 2 because it is kind of more unique and different. Alright guys, that does it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, please give it a thumbs up. I would also love to hear from you in the comments. I love chatting with you guys, so let me know your thoughts on these palettes and what you think of them. Also, if you take a moment to subscribe to my channel, I would love that and appreciate it, and that way you'll be notified of future videos. Thank you guys so much, and I will see you soon.